system that are shut down. We are starting the process of reactivating certain lines, but when water covers the electrified third rail, we have to do inspections so that will be unfolding slowly. We do have a full bus system operation today. There are about 3,500 buses out there, and that's especially important, as the governor says, to get kids home from school. So if you must travel, and heed the warnings of the governor and the mayor and others, that it's not a day to travel if you don't have to, but if you do, buses are available. We have full Long Island Railroad service, but Metro North at this time has really been shut down. All three trunk lines of Metro North, New Haven, Harlem, and Hudson lines are shut down at this time because of water in the South Bronx. And we are developing a service plan, hoping that we can reactivate those operations. We're developing a limited service plan for this afternoon with the hope and expectation we'll be able to get everybody home. The good news is that New Yorkers heeded Governor Hochul's warnings and the MTA's warnings and the city's warnings from yesterday. And it is a Friday, it's a lighter than normal commute. It's always a light day on Friday, and New Yorkers listened. One of the reasons that they listened is that we have really a strong text alert system, and I urge everybody who doesn't have it to sign up for mta.info/notify. In the meantime, if you have to travel, if you are still out there, please consult the MTA apps. My MTA, the Train Time app, and the MTA website, mta.info. We have full up-to-date information. As I said, about half of the subway system is either fully suspended or partially suspended, but we are starting the process of trying to get some of those lines back. The other positive news I would emphasize is that since Hurricane Ida 2 years ago, Governor Hochul instructed us to work with the city to try to make some of the stations more resilient so we wouldn't have those impacts on customers that you saw a couple of years ago. That collaboration has produced results, and to date, there haven't been any of those crazy washouts inside the stations, though, as I said, service has been affected. Please stay close to those MTA apps for real-time information, My MTA, the Train Time app, and www.mta.info. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Lieber. And so with that, we'll open it up to some on-topic questions.
Okay, just a reminder, if you have a question, to use the hand raise function on your screen. We'll start with Ethan Stark-Miller from AM New York. Ethan, you can now unmute your line.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, so question for Mr. Mayor. I mean, there are asylum seekers in shelters that are tent-like facilities at Creedmoor on Randall's Island. Are they safe in those facilities with these conditions? And is the city taking any steps to move them elsewhere?
We have no reported conditions in those areas on Randall's and at the Creedmoor location. And of course, if there are any conditions that are dangerous, we're going to make sure that people receive the proper care and make the proper movement.
Mayor, I just got an update on Randall specifically. We've seen very minimal leaking at Randall's Island, and any problems that will be very quickly addressed. So we have no issues really at Randall's Island at this point.
Great. Next, we'll go to Katie Honan from the city. Katie, you can now unmute your line.
Questions briefly. Chancellor Banks, there have been reports of schools flooding. I saw someone tweet that the cafeteria was flooded, students can't eat. My question for you, and I guess the question for the mayor is, New York City has been flooded for hours now. We're finally now hearing from the city. A press release, I think for a lot of people doesn't count. Why did you not take more precautions when it came to schools? Students don't know how they're going to get home if the subways don't return service. And secondly, I don't know if there's any disruption with bus services. And so I guess the question is for the chancellor, can you give an update on schools and which ones are flooded? And for the mayor, why did you not speak to New Yorkers sooner about what is a very, very serious flooding situation that we knew about for at least 24 hours?
Katie, the chancellor is going to go into the school.
You're just listening in there to officials in New York talk about this historic flooding, comparing it to Ida. Andy Mack will be sliding away for a quick 2-minute break for some of you.
Commissioner Iscol has been speaking about this from afternoon yesterday, so all the necessary precautions were taken. We have gone through these flood-related and heavy rain conditions before, and we followed the right protocol. And really take my hat off to Commissioner Iscol and the entire team as they put in place a situation of communication using the virtual methods and monitoring the situation, really doing what needed to be done and making the right notifications and informations and constantly keeping New Yorkers up to date. Chancellor, can you go into the school situation? Where are we at this time?
Sure, Mayor. First of all, it's just important to note that all of our schools, every single one of our schools are open. We're actively monitoring the situation across all of our buildings. We have safety plans in place, and that's important to note. And we have folks in our schools who are trained annually to prepare for days just like this. Our building response teams, they fully activated, and our protocol is to, in fact, shelter in place. Now, we do have a portion of our schools, approximately 150 out of the more than 1,400 schools that we have, that have, in fact, taken on some water, has presented some challenge, but nothing has impacted the ability for us to safely educate our students in any of those schools. Our schools have safety plans in place, and they are moving forward, and they're keeping us abreast. This stuff is happening in real time. There's one school is actually evacuating currently due to a smoking boiler, and that is PS 132 in Brooklyn. And it looks like there may have been some water that got into a boiler. So we're evacuating that school to IS 78, which is located 3 blocks away. That's the only school that we've had to date at this time have to actually evacuate. Our facilities and the School Construction Authority are working together to quickly repair any damage. Even now, we've got folks out in many of these buildings in real time. Now, also, I want to note that we received multiple media inquiries about the David Booty School, which is IS 228 in Brooklyn. And the message that the principal of that school sent was premature in telling parents to come up to get their kids, which was precisely the wrong thing to do. The conditions are worse outside of the schools. And so we'll be addressing that. But as the rain lightens up, we're continuing to monitor the situation. And what's also important is that our buses are pre-positioned for dismissal. We've been in touch with all of our vendors, and their pre-position means that they are staging early in order to have enough time to get our kids home. These are high axle vehicles, and they'll be able to navigate any water in the roadways. So in closing, I would simply say our schools are open. We feel good. We're fully prepared. We're ready to go. We have taken on some water, but nothing that has created an infrastructure problem where our kids are not safe. Our kids are safe, and we're continuing to monitor the situation.
Thank you, Chancellor. And just to add a little to what the mayor said earlier, our first our first Notify NYC alert went out yesterday afternoon around 2:50 p.m. One of the first efforts we took was issuing a travel advisory. We've been in touch with local elected officials across the city. We've also been working with nonprofits. And like the mayor said, Commissioner Iscol was out there doing interviews yesterday. Commissioner Iscol is one of our top spokespeople for this administration, and so he speaks on behalf of the mayor every single day.
And Commissioner Iscol, could you share a few words about our decision-making process for notifying people and how we make sure that New Yorkers take these notifications seriously by issuing them thoughtfully?
Yeah. So first off, Notify NYC, as I said, it's available in 14 languages, including American Sign Language. We do a lot of programs, especially since Ida, to really encourage New Yorkers to sign up. We've done a number of day of actions. We did one about a month ago in Jackson Heights and across the city, encouraging people not only to sign up for Notify NYC, but to make sure they have the information they need for these types of flooding events, including the distribution of flood alarms that people can then install in their homes. In terms of Notify NYC itself for these types of events, we take information, we work very, very closely with the National Weather Service. We take their alerts, their warnings, their analysis, and we make sure that we then translate that literally to 14 different languages in American Sign Language, but also so that the public can understand what that threat might be. In addition to making sure we're providing information, not just what the hazard is, but the actions people can take to keep themselves, their loved ones safe.
Thank you, Commissioner Iscol.
For the next question, we'll go to Juliet Pappas. Juliet, you can now unmute your line. Juliet, you there? All right, we'll move to...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Hello?
hear you now. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. If the fire commissioner is on this call, I was wondering, or who can answer this, have there been basement apartment rescues? And if you have any sense of where and how many? Because Ida, there were fatalities at that time. And I was wondering if there are any fatalities so far today.
Hi, Juliet. It's Commissioner Kavanaugh. We have not had any fatalities today. We have had a number of calls for basements, people trapped in cars. As you've probably seen from the coverage, you can see our vehicles out there all over the city, but we have not had any critical patients or fatalities yet today.
Just a follow up on Commissioner Kavanaugh. Since the last update I received about an hour ago, we've had reports for 6 basement apartments flooded, and we've had successful rescues at each of those.
Thanks.
I'd also like to add to that, as the mayor had mentioned, we were made aware yesterday through OEM about this storm, and we put additional high axle vehicles out into our operations. So we had equipment that was specifically available and ready for these types of rescues.
Next, we'll go to Kelly Mena from New York One. Kelly, you can now unmute your line.
Oh, hello. Okay. My first question is to Chancellor Banks. I'm wondering why the decision wasn't made to go remote today for students if it's such a severe day. I mean, parents have to travel to get their kids have to travel to schools. We've heard from multiple officials to stay off the roads today. And then to follow up on Katie's question, Mayor Adams, it's noon right now. Why wasn't the decision to call a state of emergency at 8 a.m. when we knew that rainfall was getting intense?
First, and the chancellor could talk about remote, but we should be clear that we have only a certain number of school days that we could utilize, and we must make sure we meet that. And as you see, the decision was the right decision. We do not have any issues, dangerous issues at our schools. Our children are in the schools. They're properly being educated, and I believe the chancellor made the right call. And if there was a need to close the schools, he would have made that call. But this was the right call. Our children are safe in schools. It stabilizes the family. They don't have a level of uncertainty of how they get to and from their office spaces. There is a big inconvenience when you close the school and parents disrupt their normal workflow, and we disrupt a child's education flow at the same time. This was the right decision to do. As we see, we are continuously moving forward, and our children are safe in their schools. Chancellor, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, just that I would echo what you said, Mr. Mayor. You know, I've heard that on other occasions as well. I don't want people to be very clear. The decision to go remote is always the last option. Our kids need to be in school. This is where they also get their healthy meals as well. This is what allows parents to be able to continue their day and get to work and do the other things that need to happen. Whenever we make a decision to actually close schools, it is a major, major disruption. And so it is really only used really as a last resort. And I think in this case, while this was a tough day in terms of the rain, it certainly did not put our kids are not in danger. All of our schools are open. Our teachers are in school. Our kids are in school and doing well. We do have some schools which have had some flooding, and we have to address that. But we treat taking the option of the remote learning day very, very seriously, and we use that as a last option.
It's just really commendable on how professional our school system, our first responders, the exact team during these issues of weather emergency.
All right, you're watching this update there out of New York City from earlier this week. I'm Andy Mack. Some of you are going to see a quick 2-minute break.
Really commendable with the coordination from this team. The city still has to operate with minimum disruption, and that's what you saw in our school system, as well as the deputy mayor pointed out, that, you know, able to go in and do those rescues when it's needed and to notify people. The city must continue to operate, and we want to be clear on that. Zach, can you talk about the state of emergency? State of emergency that we're calling is based on conditions, not based on predictions. You know, it's based on what condition. But Zach, can you go through that, please?
Absolutely. So there's a number of different uses for a state of emergency, and I appreciate the question. You know, the issuing a state of emergency at 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 9 a.m., or 10 a.m., it's not going to impact our response or the work that we're currently doing. A lot of the state of emergency is more about things that we can then put in place should we need to around contracting, around different rules. Things like if we were going to issue a travel ban, which we are not at the state right now where we would actually implement a travel ban, you know, shutting down roads, not enabling people to freely move around the city. It's also something that becomes very, very important as we move into the recovery phase, right? One of the things that's needed is as we start to assess the damage that has occurred to either people's homes, private personal property, businesses, the state of emergency is something we can then use as we are going to the state and FEMA for additional support to aid in individual assistance, business loans or grants that can help people recover after the floodwaters have receded.
I would also add that the governor issued her state of emergency this morning around the same time the decision was made here at City Hall. Mayor Adams made the decision around the same time. So just because we're having the briefing now around 11:30 or 12, whatever it is right now, doesn't mean it wasn't the decision wasn't made earlier today.
Next, we'll go to Mark Morales from CNN. Mark. Mark, you should be able to speak now. All right, we'll go to the next one. Next, we'll go to Craig McCarthy from the New York Post. Craig, you can unmute your line.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to ask, so you say you don't need to, your administration is saying you don't need to issue a state of emergency at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. This is about recovery. But then, the National Weather Service issued an alert at 8:24 this morning calling the flash flooding warning life-threatening. So why did it take hours then for you to tell the New Yorkers to stay home?
Zach, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, I just want to issue a point of clarification. What I went through is a whole list of reasons that you would use a state of emergency. Preemptively, you would do it if the situation might call for that. In this case, there was no need for additional resources that a state of emergency might provide, or things like, issuing a travel ban. There was no need for a state of emergency earlier to be able to do those types of things. I have been in very close contact with my counterparts at both FEMA and the state around whether or not there are additional resources we might need to request, for things like life safety events. But we have the resources here in the city through our incredible partners at FDNY, EMS, NYPD to be able to respond to those types of situations. So I hope that answers your question.
Next, we'll go to Emma Fitzsimmons from the New York Times. Emma, you can unmute your line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Emma.
Hi, good afternoon. So, Mayor, I'm curious, why it took so long for you to speak to the public. Governor Hochul was on the radio last night. MTA officials held a news conference, and a lot of New Yorkers, were worried this morning and facing these implications. And why didn't they hear from you sooner?
I think it's so important, as I've stated over and over again, this administration operates as a team. And I want my commissioners, my deputy commissioners, the leaders of this team who are closest to the ground of a situation to communicate. And that's what Commissioner Isco did. There was not an absence of a voice of this administration, our team leaders that are on the front line. I'm just really pleased that I have strong, competent leaders that understand their roles that they're supposed to play, and I give them a clear mandate that if something is dealing with a particular issue in your catchment area, I want you to lead from the front. And you see that over and over again. You see it with the Chancellor. You see it with Commissioner Kavanaugh. You see it with all of our leaders. And that's what Zach did. You heard from my representative, and he did a good job of informing the public. And that's what you're going to continue to see throughout this administration. We have good team leaders that are competent, that understand the subject matter, and they know how to lead. The leadership is not only the mayor, it is all of those who are placed in those positions, and that's what you saw.
And just to go back to Craig's previous question, he asked about why timing on a travel advisory. So I would just again point out that a travel advisory was one of the first measures put in place by this administration, and the Notify NYC alert first came out at 2:50 yesterday. So the advisory was in place. That's a different thing than a state of emergency.
Our last.
Commissioner Iscol wants to add something. Commissioner?
Yeah, I was just confirming. Yes, the travel advisory went out yesterday. That's correct.
All right, we have time for two more. We'll go to Annie McDonough. Annie, you can unmute your line.
Questions. First, do you have advice on where people living in basement apartments or experiencing flooding should go, where they should move to higher ground in that event? Are there city locations where they could go and access somewhere to be if they're experiencing flooding at home? And second, for the mayor, can you talk more about what you saw in East New York this morning? Were you examining street conditions, talking to residents? What exactly were you doing there?
The issues around basement apartments and where we're going to have people, the first order of business is make sure we properly rescue, and we will have sites for those who can't go with families and friends. We will always provide shelter for those who are in need, and we will navigate that. I was in East New York over at the Christian Cultural Center for, unfortunately, a loss of a former retired police officer, and while I was there, I took the opportunity to go through East New York, into Canarsie, into the Flatbush area, as well as the Sheepshead Bay area to get an observation on what was happening on the ground prior to doing this press advisory.
Our last question will go to Joe Anuda from Politico. Joe, you can unmute your line. Joe, going once? Oh.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, actually, for the OEM Commissioner, Commissioner Iscol, can you just give us a sense of the media hits that you've mentioned that you did yesterday to warn New Yorkers? And then for DP Commissioner, can you talk a little bit about when you started clearing catch basins, how many you cleared, just describe the operation a little more? Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I did a 10-10 winds hit and then did a Fox weather hit. And then we've also, as the mayor has noted, sent out the Notify NYCs, the press releases, the travel advisories, social media posts, in addition to all the other messaging that was coming from the city.
All right, that's all the time we have.
And then, hold on, do you want me to answer the other part?
Oh, sorry about that, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just yesterday morning, the flash flood, I don't have the precise time, the flash flood plan was activated yesterday morning. And as per that plan, DEP, along with several other city agencies, sanitation, DOT, a couple of other agencies that have crews on the roads, we have a list of priority intersections, which are highly vulnerable to flooding or are important for some way. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've worked closely with the MTA to make sure that catch basins that could affect subway stations are on that list. I don't have an exact number. I would probably get it later today of how many catch basins we checked and cleaned. in those 12 hours, I guess, before the rain started. But that is what we do the day before, as well as get ready for the staffing, and that's why we actually canceled some holidays that people had scheduled and things like that to make sure we had full crews on site today across the city.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you have additional questions.
All right, thank you again for that update there out of New York. Certainly a lot of rain, a lot of issues there in terms of infrastructure and flooding around the Big Apple there, certainly in the subway system as well. You saw some of those dramatic video from underneath. All right, a few live now looks, including New York City here, just about 3 o'clock on the East Coast. A live look there down at Capitol Hill. That's where we're going to take you out to next. Of course, the deal there being struck for a continuing resolution to fund the government. That was a big deal, certainly with this August 1st deadline just coming in at the last moment. For more on this, let's go out to our Fox Capitol Hill reporter, Chad Pergram, who has the latest on the breakdown.
A government shutdown averted. A coalition of Democrats and Republicans in both the House and Senate voting to avoid a shutdown. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy leaned on Democrats to get this done.
I'm sure every bet you had was government was going to shut down. I don't know how many times you're going to count us out. But if there's one thing you should start understanding, not just that I'll never give up, but I'm a type of conservative that wants to get things done.
After the House passed the bill, the pressure turned to the Senate.
Democrats and Republicans have come to an agreement, and the government will remain open. Bipartisanship, which has been the trademark of the Senate, has prevailed, and the American people can breathe a sigh of relief.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy worked with Democrats. They worked with Democrats to get this bill passed. People here who follow the Congress thought that that was always going to be the avenue that they were going to go along. Kevin McCarthy could never get all Republicans to kind of caramelize around a GOP-only bill. And the route to funding the government, to preventing a shutdown, was working with Democrats. Well, Matt Gaetz, the Republican from Florida, has consistently said that he might drop this sword of Damocles on the House Speaker if he was to work with Democrats here, and he would call for a motion to vacate the chair. This would be to demand a new Speaker election in the middle of the Congress. We haven't had one of those since 1910.
We are at this point because Kevin McCarthy made multiple contradictory promises about the budget top line to different groups of people. He made one promise to House conservatives in January to secure the position. He made another promise to President Biden. He made a third promise altogether to House appropriators. So Kevin's deal was, if he made multiple contradictory promises and delayed as long as possible, he could push people up against shutdown politics in order to avoid the programmatic level review that House conservatives have called for.
It's unclear if Gaetz will attempt his gambit in the coming days, but no government shutdown at least for 6 weeks. On Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
All right, thank you so much. At least for 6 weeks, we won't have to talk about that potential government shutdown. Until then, we're going to continue on. Of course, President Biden spoke here earlier on this Sunday about this temporary funding of the government. Let's listen into what he had to say from earlier today at the White House.
Afternoon. Last night, Congress passed the spending bill that's going to keep the government open. And it's good news for the American people because the government will not shut down and a needless crisis will have been averted, saving millions of Americans needless pain. And that means more than 1,300,000 of our troops will continue to get paid and their families will be cared for. Tens of thousands of air traffic controllers and transportation security officers are going to stay on the job, get paid, preventing unnecessary delays at airports all across America. And millions of families will continue to have access to critical food and nutrition assistance, especially programs for women and infant children, and so many other programs. And the vital work in science and health, from cancer research to food safety, is going to continue, as will long-term disaster recovery monies for communities devastated by wildfires, superstorms, and droughts. Social Security Administration will be fully funded, which means that we'll be able to fully serve the needs of the American people and the elderly. But folks, the truth is we shouldn't be here in the first place. We shouldn't have gotten here in the first place. It's time to end governing by crisis and keep your word when you give it in the Congress. A few months ago, after a long negotiation between myself and the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, we came to agree on a budget agreement precisely to avoid a manufactured crisis that we just witnessed. But the last few days and weeks, extreme MAGA Republicans tried to walk away from that deal, voting for deep, drastic spending cuts from 30 to 80% that would have been devastating for millions of Americans. They failed again. They failed again, and we stopped them. But I'm under no illusions that they'll be back again. You know, where I come from, when you make a deal, you give your word, you keep it. You give your word, you say, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, and you do it. You keep it. You keep your word. And I expect the Republican Speaker and Republicans in Congress to honor their word and keep the deal they made months ago when they tried to threaten us with almost international bankruptcy by not paying our debts. That includes comments made for fully funded services for our veterans and fully fund the needs of defense of our nation. You know, protect we have transformational investments we're already making to deal with the climate crisis. We are, protect Medicare's ability and power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices. We pay the highest prescription drug prices in the world. We're finally making progress. Although the Speaker and an overwhelming majority of the Congress have steadfastly supported Ukraine to defend itself against the aggression and brutality of the Russians' attack on women and children, in addition to the military in Ukraine, there's no Ukraine funding in this agreement. Despite that, I did not believe we could let millions of Americans go through the pain of a government shutdown. But let's be clear. I hope my friends on the other side keep their word about support for Ukraine. They said they're going to support Ukraine in a separate vote. We cannot, under any circumstance, allow American support for Ukraine to be interrupted. I fully expect the Speaker to keep his commitment to secure the passage and support needed to help Ukraine as they defend themselves against aggression and brutality. And folks, overwhelmingly, there's an overwhelming number of Republicans and Democrats in both the House and the Senate who support Ukraine. Let's vote on it. And I want to assure our American allies and the American people and the people of Ukraine that you can count on our support. We will not walk away. The vast majority of both parties, I'll say it again, Democrats and Republicans, Senate and House, support helping Ukraine and the brutal aggression that is being thrust upon them by Russia. Stop playing games. Get this done. This agreement today, while averting an immediate crisis, ends in, I guess it's 45 days now. It's already moving down, just before Thanksgiving. Quite frankly, I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of the brinksmanship. And so are the American people. I've been doing this, you all point out to me a long time. I've never quite seen a Republican Congress or any Congress act like this. This spring, MAGA Republicans brought us to the brink, threatening to default on America's debt for the first time in over 200 years. And it would have caused a gigantic world crisis, both at home and abroad. But we reached an agreement. We shook hands, said, here's the deal. Well, now this fall, the MAGA extremists once again have brought us to the brink, this time to a government shutdown, and going back on the deal they made months ago, not keeping their word. Enough is enough is enough. This is not that complicated. The brinkmanship has to end, and there shouldn't be another crisis. There's no excuse for another crisis. Consequently, I strongly urge my Republican friends in Congress not to wait. Don't waste time as you did all summer. Pass a year-long budget agreement. Honor the deal we made a few months ago. We have the strongest economy in the world today. The strongest economy in the world today. We have more to do. But we are the indispensable nation in the world, internationally and domestically, in terms of our economy. Let's act like it. Let's act like it. Stop the games. Get to work. Make sure the American people and our allies and friends around the world know what we're doing. Thank you.
Mr. President, Speaker McCarthy's speakership is now at risk. Should Democrats vote to help him keep that job?
I don't have a vote on that matter. I'll leave that to the leadership of the House and the Senate.
Mr. President, what are your words to U.S. allies, and in particular Zelensky, on continued funding for Ukraine? How can you reassure them?
I can reassure them, look at me, we're going to get it done. I can't believe those who voted for supporting Ukraine, overwhelming majority in the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, will, for pure political reasons, let more people die needlessly in Ukraine.
And Mr. President, a follow-up on Ukraine. What is your sense of when the current U.S. funding might run out, and how much urgency is there? What's the timeline in the next couple of weeks or months?
We have time, not much time, and there's this overwhelming sense of urgency.
Mr. President, are you going to be able to trust Speaker McCarthy when the next deal comes around?
We just made one about Ukraine, so we'll find out.
But are you worried that he is going to be forced by fellow Republicans to back away from any deal he cuts with you?
I hope this experience for the Speaker has been one of a personal revelation. I'm not being facetious. Anyway.
Are you concerned about America's reputation on the world stage, given the level of brinksmanship we've seen this year?
Based on the mega Republican report, yes. Based on what my administration is doing, no. Thank you.
All right, you're just listening in there. President Biden there at the White House here on this Sunday. Certainly some stumbling through his words there at the very end, answering questions about this new continuing resolution already. Also about the funding there for Ukraine. That was a key point of this, as they also fund the government, but also continue to provide support there as Russia invaded Ukraine almost 19 months ago. Now, a live look in our nation's capital, of course, coming up after the break. We'll take you out to Speaker McCarthy, as potentially there will be a vote there. Matt Gaetz talking about potentially trying to put that into question one more time. Of course, it took some 15-plus rounds for Speaker McCarthy to earn that the first time around, so this could be interesting this week. But certainly the crisis averted with the government shutdown funded for at least 45 more days until we do this same story one more time. All right, I'm Andy Mack. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. Of course, we were just talking about the averted government shutdown as they passed a continuing resolution. Certainly, it didn't feel likely this week. Certainly not so much optimism until it was finally done at the final moments. Of course, we were hearing from Speaker McCarthy yesterday talking about this. Let's listen into what he had to say from yesterday.
Stay in session the next 2 weeks, continue to work to get this done. But you cannot look the men and women in our military in the eye and ask them why they are not going to be able to pay their bills because the Senate hasn't done their work. Look, I know a lot of you always ask me all the negative questions. I'm sure every bet you had was government was going to shut down. I don't know how many times you're going to count us out. But if there's one thing you should start understanding, not just that I'll never give up, but I'm a type of conservative that wants to get things done. It's easy to be a conservative that wants to do nothing. But I believe America wants to find the conservative that can make government work efficiently, effectively, and accountable. And that's exactly what we're doing in our appropriations process. In the wasteful spending, in the wokeism, but most importantly, secure our border. Our president, who never once talked to any of us during this challenge of the government shutting down. He watches night after night how thousands of people cross this border illegally because of his policies. The largest number ever in the last month. For 50 years, he has been in elected office. He has been to more dinners with Hunter Biden's business partners than he has gone to the border. Things has got to change. Our border has to be secure. We've got to end the wasteful spending to end the inflation that he has created. And that's exactly what we'll do and exactly what we are doing when we put our commitment to America to work. With that, let me introduce an amazing team up here, from our leader to our whip to our conference chair to all those members that worked so hard. And let me tell you, today wasn't the choice we wanted to have. We tried to pass the most conservative stopgap measure possible. We had members from all sides of the aisle work on it. We put it on the floor, but unfortunately, we didn't have 218 Republicans that would vote for that to help us secure the border then. But today, we're able to move forward to make sure we can challenge that. And one of our best leaders out here is our majority leader, Steve Scalise.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today the House came together to do our jobs to continue this battle. And believe me, this is not the end. This is the beginning of a continued fight to secure our border, to get government spending under control, and to get our economy back on track. And that means for the next 45 days, we're going to be working through the remaining issues. As the Speaker talked about, starting Monday, we're coming back here in the House to continue the appropriations process. The House has now passed over 70% of government funding in the appropriations bills. We've passed those bills over to the Senate. The Senate has taken up 0 appropriations bills that they've passed. So it's time for the Senate to start doing their job. It's time for the appropriations process to keep moving forward. The House is going to keep moving forward with the remaining appropriations bills. All the bills that are still out there, both sitting to come to the floor, there are 2 that are still in committee. All those are going to be moving in the next few weeks. Starting Monday, we will be back here working on those remaining appropriations bills. But as I will remind everybody, over these last few days, you saw the House pass over 70% of funding of government appropriations bills to the Senate, with the priorities of the House to address our border crisis, to address getting our economy back on track, to get our military focused on the threats that are posed by countries like China. And so that focus will continue. Our work will continue. There is a lot of work left to be done. There's another 45 days. That doesn't mean that what just happened today ends. That means these next 45 days, we're going to be busy working here in the People's House. It's time the Senate do that same aggressive form of work, and it's long past time that Joe Biden get engaged in this process as well. He opened the southern border. He created a mess that has riveted the entire nation to the point where Republican mayors, Democrat mayors who are switching to Republican because they're fed up with the open southern border and the damage it's causing, not just to our southern border, the damage it's causing to every community in America who is now a border town, because they're seeing the deaths from the fentanyl overdose. They're seeing people coming across in every community, people on the terrorist watch list, coming across by the thousands every single day, and Joe Biden hasn't cared about this crisis. The American people care about it. House Republicans care about it. We have now continued to push and will continue to push over these next 45 days to get this border crisis solved as we work to solve all of the other problems holding our country back. With that, bring up the man who works to get the votes today. Strong, strong vote. Our whip, Mr. Emmer.
Thank you, Steve. Well, what a week. What a week. We started off like most weeks with direction given to us by our Speaker, our Majority Leader, our Conference Chair, our membership, and it was like riding a mechanical bull all week as we made our way through stuff that nobody ever thought we could do again. I want to thank the Speaker for his leadership because what he tried to do was work with every member of our conference. He tried to make sure that everybody's voice was being heard, that everybody had a chance to take whatever vote they wanted to. They were all given an opportunity to vote for the best bill you possibly could have had yesterday. A spending cut, border security, disaster aid, and we just couldn't quite get that one over the line. So after exhausting everything else, this Speaker understands that shutting the government down is not an option. And for those naysayers out there who say, oh, let us shut down, if you're a fiscal conservative, you do not want the government to shut down because you are going to pay a whole lot more if that happens. And our members, I'm grateful that they understood it. I will tell everybody, no, I'm not happy. We did not have 218 Republicans still. That doesn't work for me. And we're going to have to do a better job of making sure that happens. But I'm very pleased to be part of this team and all of our members. And again, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the bull by the horns and putting this thing on the floor and getting it done. Our conference chair, Lee Stefan.
Thank you, Tom. As we face this challenge, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, House Democrats showed zero leadership. House Republicans will continue to step up to lead. Under the leadership of our Speaker, this leadership team, but most importantly, all the members of the House Republican Conference, we get the job done and deliver on behalf of the American people, keeping the government open and, importantly, continuing the appropriations process to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And this was despite House Democrats' attempts to delay, to obstruct, and to even pull the fire alarm to stop this important vote from happening. We're going to continue to stand up on behalf of the American people, and despite being underestimated every week, we see you every single week and you underestimate us. We will continue to get the job done on behalf of our constituents across America. And I'm proud to turn it back over to the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
I was really appalled of watching Democrats' actions today. To delay it, to get to a shutdown. But when we found that an individual elected to Congress would pull a fire alarm, that's a new low. We watched how people have been treated if they've done something wrong in this Capitol. It'll be interesting to see how he is treated on what he was trying to obstruct when it came to the American public. With that, I look forward to your very open and optimistic questions that you have been asking this entire time. So let's turn to CNN. I've been praying for you.
Well, as you know, this threat of your speakership has been hanging over you for some time, and especially if you rely on Democratic votes here, and Democrats just helped carry this across the finish line. Do you expect to rely on Democratic votes if the vote to vacate comes up? Will you need Democrats to keep you in the speakership?
Okay, can we now realize what the question was and realize what has happened today? We were within a few hours of government shutting down. where the military would not be paid, where the border would not be paid. They talked about FAA having problems because only the House has passed a bill and the Senate has not. It's been your, I imagine on his network he probably had a shutdown clock on. The Senate stymied of what they can do. All of that has now been waved away. And the only question CNN has for me today was whether I'm worried about someone making a motion to vacate against me.
No, it was whether you aligned Democratic votes.
No, let's understand what the bill was. We put a bill on the floor in suspension. So there's no bill that can pass with one party or the other. When are you guys going to get over that it's all right that you put America first? That it's all right if Republicans and Democrats join together to do what is right. If somebody wants to make a motion against me, bring it. There has to be an adult in the room. I am going to govern what is best for this country. I don't understand how long will it take to understand that. I went 15 rounds. The same individual that voted against us even having a more conservative stopgap measure. The same individual who threatens it, that delayed us from ever getting all of our appropriate bills done. Did the same thing during the speaker's race. That's okay. He has a right to do it. But I'm going to be a conservative that gets things done for the American public. And whatever that holds, so be it. Because I believe in not giving up on America. I'm not going to be beholden to somebody who portrays and does something different. Yes, sir.
One of the big differences between what the Senate had advanced and what you passed was aid for Ukraine.
No, the Senate hasn't advanced anything. The Senate hasn't advanced one appropriation bill. The Senate hasn't advanced anything for the FAA. The Senate hasn't advanced anything for the Parents' Bill of Rights. The Senate hasn't done anything for energy, and the price of oil is $100. They haven't done one appropriation bill. So please, praise the Senate some more and ask me your question.
Well, my question is, will you put aid for Ukraine on the floor in the next 45 days?
Listen, what the Senate wanted to do was focus on Ukraine in front of America. I understand our responsibilities, but I'm going to put America first. If there's a moment in time we need to have a discussion about that, we will have a discussion completely about that. But I think the administration has to make the case for what is victory. And I've asked the administration to come down and talk to our members about that. Yes, sir. And I want to congratulate you because you have spent overtime here. And you wear a tie when the guy next to you doesn't even have well, you have a collared shirt on. But you were here late at night, so you should really get the first question, but go ahead.
So over the past couple of weeks, it seems that there was not going to be a clean CR put on the floor. When did you kind of change your mind? How did that all come
So wait, let me give you this experience here. Were you doubting whether we could get the job done?
Was I doubting?
Were you doubting we would make that happen? All right, okay. Listen. Winston Churchill once said this about America. You can always count on Americans to do what's right after they exhausted every other option. It is very clear that I tried every possible way, listening to every single person in the conference. When we went to vote on appropriations bills you didn't think we could pass, we passed them. It was tough, but we got it through. We made sure we came down the last hour. Would I have wanted the bill we put on the floor yesterday that would secure our border, cut wasteful spending? Yes, I did. But I had some members in our own conference that wouldn't vote for that. So if you have members in your conference that won't let you vote for appropriation bills, doesn't want an omnibus, and won't vote for a stopgap measure, so the only answer is to shut down and not pay our troops, I don't want to be a part of that team. I want to be a part of a conservative group that wants to get things done. Yes, sir.
What's your message to the 21 members who didn't support this and led to this decision? Should they expect to see more votes like this where you work with Democrats if they aren't team players?
Look, one thing about me is I'm never giving up on the American people. I'm going to focus on America first, and I'm going to solve those problems. I believe at the end of the day, we'll get them back on board. Yes, ma'am.
Does Ukraine have to be tied to border security?
Look, I think so it's very important. If we're worried about Ukraine's border, we should worry about America's border too. And I think an opportunity to solve the border along America is now one of the biggest issues in New York. The governor of Massachusetts has declared a state of emergency. The governor of New York tells people to go somewhere else. The mayor of New York City says it's destroying, which many in this country believe is one of the greatest cities America has. And we have a president that has only been to the border one time in 50 years, but went to Cafe Milano twice with Hunter Biden's business partners and got $3 million for it, and his son got a new Porsche. You know what? I will do whatever it takes to get the president to come down to the border. Bring one of Hunter's business partners. I don't care, but we need to secure this border. Yes, sir.
You talked a little bit about the right that you wouldn't vote for anything. Have you learned anything about your confidence in those 20 or so people and handling them going forward?
It's a daily basis. You watch for 9 months. I hope they learn from me that I won't give up, and they'll know I'll keep fighting. So it's better that we all come together. When we all come together, we're much stronger. I've watched what we've been able to achieve so far. Think for one moment. When Washington, D.C. wanted to decriminalize almost every single crime, we united. The Senate said they wouldn't get up. We had 172 Democrats vote against it. We had the president say he'd veto it, and he ended up signing it. We went and heard parents across the country that get arrested when they go to a school board meeting simply because they wanted to talk about what was happening. We passed the Parents' Bill of Rights. We ended the pandemic when they said the Senate wouldn't take it up and the president wouldn't sign it. We passed the most conservative border security bill in the history of Congress. We passed an energy bill that would make us energy independent and create more jobs, lower inflation. We were able to get the largest cuts in American history during the debt. We were able to cut more than $2 trillion, get work requirements that the president said would be a red line, get NEPA reform for the first time in 40 years, and put a provision in that would put a 1% cut across the board if the House and Senate doesn't do their job. So we got the Senate at least to pass the approach bills in committee. They just have a hard time getting it to the floor. So the one thing I've learned is get things done, bring others along, and look, I welcome those 21 back in, and we would get a better and more conservative bill if they would simply vote with us.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, ma'am.
I know Senator Mullin was over on the side of the Capitol a lot this morning. What were your conversations though like with Leader McConnell? Did you talk to him this morning?
I didn't get it. Mark Wayne Mullin, a former member of Congress and a dear personal friend of mine, he was great. He was in the House. He was being able to convey what was happening in the Senate. No, I talked to Senator Thune many times, and I thought Senator Thune did a tremendous job through it all. I had worked with McConnell early on in a lot of this too, but I didn't get to talk to him today, no.
Mr. Speaker, are you satisfied with that final vote tally? More Democrats voting for this than Republicans?
Okay, let's understand. There's different ways bills come up. If I bring a bill up under a rule, it only takes 218 to pass. If it's on suspension, it takes Republicans and Democrats together. We had the majority of the Republicans voting for it. But let's put it in perspective. What happened prior to the bill? The Democrats first wanted to adjourn. Can you imagine hours away from shutting down and they wanted to adjourn? Then they came down and all voted by a card to delay it, to delay it, to delay it. Then the leader went and took a magic minute to keep talking and delaying it and delaying it and delaying it. So I think at the end of the day, we kept the government open, kept paying our troops to finish the job we have to get done. Yes, sir.
What do you think the consequences should be for people to fire once that's
You know, I think ethics should look at this, but this is serious. When you think of how other people are treated when they wanted to come in and change the course of what was happening in this building. And did he deny he did it when it's on tape? And I'm going to have a discussion with the Democratic leader about it, but this should not go without punishment. This is an embarrassment. You're elected to be a member of Congress. You pulled a fire alarm? In a minute of hours before the government being shut down, trying to dictate that government would shut down? What's going through a person's mind like that? But we will find the right ability to deal with this. Yes?
Just on the Ukraine, what can you say to people in Kiev? Do you still stand by them? Do you support them?
Yes. Yes, I do. And What Russia has done is wrong, but I believe in whatever we do, we have to define what victory is and what the plan is. And I think what the White House needs to do is come down and talk with us and lay it out where we have a part of it say as well. Yes, ma'am.
Also on Ukraine aid, what does more than half of the conference voting against $300 million into Ukraine earlier this week mean for the prospects of getting billions more to Ukraine?
That is training money. I think there's a frustration across America that sees this president ignoring America's border and more concerned about somewhere else. I truly believe if he would focus on America, we'd be in a stronger place. Yes, ma'am.
Speaker, the appropriations bills you have passed have very steep spending cuts that the Senate is not likely to accept. So 45 days, what are you going to do to make sure we don't end up?
Okay, can you tell me what bills in the Senate, in the appropriations they passed? Has the Senate passed any bills? Yes or no? No, have they passed any bill? Has the Senate passed any bills? It's not a tough question. Yes or no? Did the Senate pass a bill? You want me to answer it for you? Or are you not covering it? I can answer it any way I want. You have a right to ask me a question, but I have a right to answer it. So are you embarrassed because the Senate hasn't passed any bill? Is that why you won't answer it, or do you not know the answer to the question? The answer to the question is the Senate is a different body than the House. The House has a right to act and have a say in the direction they want. The Senate can pass any bill they want, and then you go to conference. When the Senate passes a bill, I'll be surprised, and then we can go to conference. In 45 days, we should get our work all done. Yes?
Okay. Are you planning to stick to or eventually revert to the spending caps agreement you struck?
Look, I like to save whatever dollars. This is interesting. If you do have a child, but as your child gets older, if I have 2 kids, if I give my Connor and Megan $100 to go to dinner, one spends 100 and one spends 90. Should the other spend all the way up to 100? If we can save money, let's save money together. Let's lower whatever we can do. If we can save for the hardworking taxpayers, why can't we have that discussion? It doesn't mean you have to spend every dollar you want. That's a spending limit. That's the agreement we made. If we find that it's worthy, we could spend up to that. But if we find places we can save money, you know whose money that is? The hardworking taxpayers. Let's try to save it.
Last question.
Yes, next question. Yes, sir.
Where are you at personally?
Right here.
Where are you at personally on aid to Ukraine?
Look, I think what Russia has done is horrendous. I have a real concern of what's going to happen long term. But I don't want to waste any money. As a question was asked, how long ago? That was a year and a half ago about Ukraine aid, and I said no blank check. That's what I mean about anything. I want to make sure whatever I vote for, that it's going and it's held accountable. I think there's accountability problems that we have to go, but I also make sure that we have to finish the job at the same time. Thank you all very much. I look forward to all your positive.
Are you just listening there? Speaker McCarthy discussing this temporary spending that is moving through, of course, averting that government shutdown. Of course, McCarthy was not very optimistic early in the week, and then they eventually did get it done to continue to fund the government. So certainly a good end to the week there, albeit at the very end of the week. Of course, there's some conversations among other Republicans about trying to maybe test the speakership there with McCarthy. We will see if that happens this upcoming week. Certainly took many rounds, over a dozen rounds, to get Speaker McCarthy through into that role. So we'll see if it continues on. We also do see this live event taking place out of Iowa. Of course, the former president, Donald Trump, expecting to make some remarks. You can see someone stepping to the podium right here as the crowd kind of settling down. Let's slide away for a quick 2-minute break and then take you out to this live event as the former president campaigns in Iowa. All right, welcome back into Live Now from Fox. A live picture there in Iowa, one of the early primary states. Former President Trump expecting to make some remarks. This comes just a few days after that second GOP debate. Certainly something we're continuing to follow here on Live Now from Fox very, very closely. But it's not the only site where GOP candidates have come together. That includes the California GOP convention this weekend in Anaheim. Of course, former President Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was there, along with other candidates, including Tim Scott, Vivek Ramaswamy, and many more. Let's go out to this report from earlier this weekend from Bill Malugin as he reports on this GOP convention in California.
169 delegates up for grabs here in California on Super Tuesday. It's a big-time prize, and these candidates want in on it, several of them speaking here. Vivek Ramaswamy just a short time ago, though he did not address California. Take a listen.
I think California's policies have been a disaster, just as I think the Biden administration has been a disaster. But I mentioned neither Biden nor California in that speech because, as I said, I am leading us to something.
Several other candidates spoke here, including former President Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. They did decide to address the policies here in California. Take a listen.
But while California was once a symbol of American success, today under the radical left fascists and Marxists that run your state, that's who's running your state. Bad people. It's becoming a symbol of our nation's decline.
We've run into like 6 or 7 people that have gotten mugged, and they're telling the stories about getting mugged because people in California, these district attorneys in San Francisco and Los Angeles, you know, they get elected usually with funding from people like George Soros, and they decide that they are progressive and they don't agree with all the laws passed.
What I want Californians to know is that all things are possible in this nation. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail.
And the California GOP is currently finalizing a rule change for delegates, which would shift the state to a winner-takes-all approach. That means on Super Tuesday, if any of these candidates get above 50% of the vote, they get all 169 delegates for California. And as it stands right now, Donald Trump has a massive lead over the rest of the field. Reporting in Anaheim, California, Bill Malugin, Fox News.
All right, thank you so much. And it was a quick trip to California because today this is a live look there in Iowa. Former President Trump expecting to make some remarks. People in their seats, so this could be getting going momentarily. But for now, until that happens, let's take you right back out to California. Of course, we've heard from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis there in this California GOP convention. Let's listen into what he had to say from earlier this weekend.
Show, and I guess it's somewhere in Hollywood, and we drove from there to here, and I don't know how many miles it was, but it took us about 2 hours to get here. So we saw the bumper to bumper, and we were able to do that, which is, I know a lot of people in Southern California have to deal with it, but I also remember, so we got into town. Of course, we had the debate in Simi Valley at the Reagan Library on Wednesday. My wife and I, we got into town in Southern California on Sunday night, and we went to Coronado and did an event at the VFW, and that was my intro to California. I was born and raised in Florida. I had never spent time in California in any meaningful way, and I was a naval officer and got orders to report to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado for Naval Special Warfare Group 1 in preparation for deployment to Iraq. So I get to Coronado, and I'm very green, and I show up and check into the bachelor officer quarters, and being a Floridian, the first thing I looked for was the air conditioning. And they said, there is no air conditioning, just open your window, you don't need it. So I opened the window, and there was no screen on the window, which in Florida, we have bugs. They're like, no, there's no bugs, you just do it. So you open it up, you're there, and I'm like, man, I could get used to this. This is a really, really, really nice part of the world. So we did the training, everything, deployed, and then I'll never forget, after being in Iraq, not the best place in the world in terms of a lot of things, but being in that desert and then landing at Naval Air Station North Island on Coronado, and then getting off that C-5 and just having the freshness of the Pacific Ocean there hitting you, And man, like I felt, so pleased to be an American. And then the next morning, I'm out running on the beach outside the Hotel Del Coronado doing all this stuff, just soaking it in. So I had very fond memories of California, but particularly that part of California. And truth be told, growing up in Florida, I never remember seeing a single California license plate in my life. I never met anybody who had moved from California to Florida. Well, fast forward 15 years later, and I become governor, and all of a sudden we see a sea of California license plates in the state of Florida. Now, mind you, Florida, before I got elected, Florida had always been viewed as a one-point state. Democrat, Republican, I think from 2010 through 18, the governor presidential races were all decided by 1 point. I understand that one of my residents was here earlier saying that he turned Florida red. All I will say is Ronald Reagan made the point, there's no limit to what you can do when you don't care who gets the credit. I just wish if he was the one that turned Florida red that he wouldn't have torn Georgia and Arizona blue, because that's not been good for us at all. But so it had always been 1 point. So when you see California license plates, a lot of my supporters thought, uh-oh, they're going to vote like they vote in California, and it's going to turn Florida blue, and we're not going to be able to have a good state anymore. And there was a lot of fear. But I'll tell you, I started meeting these people, and they would tell me why they moved. And you don't pick up and move from Southern California to Florida because of the weather. Like, we got good weather most of the year, and summers aren't as good. Got good weather. You don't do that. You don't leave your friends and family behind and go thousands of miles just on a whim. These were people that were doing it because they were seeking to live in a free state that respected their rights and where they could thrive. And we can sit here, and I think most of you know we're scheduled to have a little tussle with your governor on Fox News on November 30th. Now, look, all I can tell you is, and I know, he'll pull out statistics and this and that, and I can pull out statistics. Like, for example, just today, Florida got ranked #1 for education freedom by the American Legislative Exchange Council. I can go all day with stuff like that. But, all you really have to do, you can take all the stats, you can take all that, you can just put it by the wayside, you can just ask the question, how are people actually voting with their feet? Because you can have a corporate media outlet try to trash Florida and try to put lipstick on a pig with regard to California. Of course they're going to do that. That's their agenda, their partisan agenda. But all you have to do is when people have to make decisions about themselves, about their families, about their freedom, how are they behaving? And people are leaving for the first time in the history of California. People are leaving on net the state of California. Where's the #1 destination that people are leaving these failed blue states are going to? The free state of Florida. So we're going to be able to, we'll be able to have those debates. But, to me, the debate about what state is governed better, Florida or California, that debate has already been answered by people voting with their feet. I think the debate is useful because California is really the petri dish for American liberalism and American leftism. And what Biden is doing are things that California was doing many years ago. What California is doing now is likely what a second Biden term would do, or God forbid Kamala Harris, or God forbid Newsom himself. Who knows, right? That's what they would do. So our country's in a state of decline, economic decline, cultural decline, military decline. The California model represents more American decline. The Florida model represents a way for us to reverse American decline. It represents a way to have an American revival. And that's ultimately the choice that people are going to have to make. This is our time for choosing. President Reagan said in his day that his generation of Americans had a rendezvous with destiny. Well, we have a rendezvous with destiny because freedom is at risk more so today than at any time in my adult lifetime. And we're going to be able to make the choice about whether we want to continue on the decline. We also can make the choice as Republicans, are we going to be satisfied with just managing the decline a little bit better than the Democrats? I could tell you I reject managed decline. I want reversal of the decline, and we'll do that. So we'll be able to hash all that out, and I think it'll be fun. But what really we need to do, and I think what we've showed in Florida is the Republican Party in recent years has been very long on rhetoric, very long on sending you emails, asking you for money, very long on all these other things.
All right, you're just listening into Florida Governor Ron DeSantis earlier this weekend in Anaheim talking to the GOP convention there in California. Some of you are going to see a quick 2-minute break.
Results that are good for your community, your state, and for your country. And in Florida, we have produced results that are second to none. I get out there and get to debate on this Simi Valley, and we did the other ones, and I listen, and it's fine. Like people say things that I think they think you want to hear, and that's better saying the wrong things, don't get me wrong. But I'm the only guy on that stage that's actually delivered on every single issue that we're talking about as Republicans. You want to talk about the economy and the budget? We know that the inflation that we're suffering under is the result of borrowing, printing, and spending by members of Congress in both parties across 2 administrations over the last 3.5 years that sunk trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy, paying people not to work, doing all this other stuff. Of course you are going to get inflation when that happens. And that is why we're in the mess. What have we done in Florida? We cut taxes by billions of dollars. We ran big budget surpluses. And since I've been governor in 2019, we've paid down 25% of our state's total outstanding debt that had accumulated its entire history as a state. So we're showing you how it's done. You look at things, we were talking about education. They're saying, whoa, should people be doing school choice? Yeah, we should do school choice. We did school choice in the state of Florida. We have universal school choice. Every parent in Florida has a right to send their kid to the school of their choosing. Maybe a private school, maybe a charter school, maybe a public school within the school district. The sky's the limit. And since we've embraced that, where does Florida rank in education? Well, we just got ranked #1 by U.S. News and World Report. We just got ranked our University of Florida just got ranked the 15th best university overall in America, including being the top-ranked public university in America. No one would have thought that was possible 20, 25 years ago. I just need their football team to start doing a little bit better, and we'll be doing really well. So we've done school choice. You want to talk about parents' rights? Everyone says how important it is. We enacted the Parents' Bill of Rights in the state of Florida. Parents have the right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids, and that means you as a parent have a right to know what is being taught in your child's school. Curriculum transparency. And unfortunately, they're trying to jam things like pornographic materials in front of very young kids. That is wrong. And in Florida, we put a stop to it. Now, the media will say, and the left will say, that if a parent objects to a book in 4th grade that is pornographic, and you remove that book from the 4th grade library, they'll claim that that's, quote, banning the book. First of all, in Florida, there's nothing banned. You as an adult can knock yourself out with that adult material. Just don't do it to the kids. Leave our kids alone. You can go read Hunter Biden's laptop for all I care if you want adult material, but just don't bring it to kids. So they'll do it, and they say, oh, it's banned. So what I did to ferret them out and to smoke them out, we did a press conference about 6 or 7 months ago titled Exposing the Book Ban Hoax. And instead of me going to the podium and talking about it, before I stepped up, before any of the parents stepped up, we just played on the video screen the images of the books that the parents had objected to. The news stations who were covering that press conference had to cut their feeds because they said it was too graphic to put on the air. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a 10-year-old school child? We complain as Republicans about schools and universities trying to indoctrinate kids. Yet in Florida, we put a stop to it. We eliminated critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. We prohibited the use of gender ideology in our schools, particularly in the elementary schools. And yes, we had to stand up to the media on that. We had to stand up to the left on that. We even had to stand up to a company in Central Florida that's pretty well known that you guys know about here in Southern California called Disney. But you know, it's wrong to tell a second grader that their gender is a choice. It's not true and it's inappropriate. And we will stand up when it's tough. When the media is bearing down on us, I will stand up. When the left is bearing down on us, I will stand up. When the most powerful company in the history of Florida is bearing down on us, I will stand up, because it is the right thing to do to stand up for the well-being of our kids, and I will do battle with anybody that seeks to rob them of their innocence. You want to talk about crime? We see crime. Just since Casey and I have been in Southern California, we've run into like 6 or 7 people that have gotten mugged. And they're telling the stories about getting mugged because people in California, these district attorneys in San Francisco and Los Angeles, you know, they get elected usually with funding from people like George Soros. And they decide that they are progressive and they don't agree with all the laws passed. And so they let the inmates run the asylum, and it puts the people of their communities at risk. Crime goes up and the quality of life becomes destroyed. In Florida, when we had 2 prosecutors, Tampa and Orlando, that got elected with Soros funding, they said or did not enforce the law as they took an oath to do. I didn't talk about it. I removed them from their posts. They are gone. When BLM was ransacking cities in the summer of 2020, I wasn't just sending social media messages saying law and order. I ensured law and order in the state of Florida. We called up the National Guard. We had state law enforcement ready. We were not going to let cities burn down in the state of Florida. And you know what? They didn't burn down in the state of Florida. And that's what should be done nationwide. We rejected the idea that we would attack police or defund the men and women in law enforcement. In fact, not only did we not defund, we now give $5,000 signing bonuses to any police officer who we recruit from out of state. I was talking to a police chief in Southern California, asked him, how are things going? He's like, they're going good, but all my police officers want to move to your state. Well, that's because they're treated well, and guess what? Florida's crime rate is not like LA or San Francisco or Chicago. Florida's crime rate's at a 50-year low. That's what you call taking care of business. We talk about things like the Communist Party of China in the debate the other night. We didn't just talk about it in Florida. We're the only state, I think, in America. We have banned the purchase of land by the Chinese Communist Party in the state of Florida. We need to do that nationwide. We sometimes talk about things like the ESG movement, which is trying to take over our economy. Asset managers at places like BlackRock want to use your money, want to use pension money from teachers and police officers to be able to advance their ideological agenda. We didn't just complain about it in Florida. We kneecapped ESG in Florida. We banned ESG from our pension funds. I took $2 billion away from BlackRock, who had managed $2 billion in our pension funds. That's gone. We eliminated the use of social credit scores in financing, and we told the credit rating agencies you can't use ESG criteria in rating our municipal bonds. And guess what? ESG is now on the defense because of what Florida is doing. That is what you call action. That is what you call getting results. And oh, by the way, They're now talking in D.C. with the Federal Reserve about imposing a central bank digital currency. We're on offense on that too. First of all, central bank digital currency, what they want to do is eliminate cash, eliminate cryptocurrency, and make this central bank digital dollar the sole way that you can participate in the economy. Why would they want to do that? Are they just trying to be friends with you? Are they just trying to make your life a little easier? No, they want to be able to control. They want to be able to impose a social credit score, a social credit system on there. And you got guys at places like the World Economic Forum that are bragging about how it would allow them to target disfavored purchases because they don't want you purchasing firearms. They don't want you purchasing a lot of gasoline. They want to be able to have the means to shut you off. So there's things that government will do that they'll dress up in benevolent ways that's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Central bank digital currency is not that. It's a wolf showing up as a wolf. They're coming after your freedom. And so in the state of Florida, we told that. We saw what the Fed's thinking about doing. So we passed legislation banning the use of central bank digital currency in the state of Florida. We're not going to let them get a foothold, and we're not going to let them take away your financial privacy. We talk about having an equal opportunity society where people aren't divvied up into different racial groups, but we're the first state to actually eliminate so-called DEI from our public universities. We're not going to treat people and shoehorn them into different ethnic groups. We're going to treat people as individuals. We're going to treat them based on merit. And this whole DEI, they say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. The way it's practiced, it's discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and has no place in our public universities. So on issue after issue, we don't chirp, we don't virtue signal, we act and we deliver. And you want to know why Florida has gone from being a state that was about 1 point to now being a state where a guy like me could win the greatest Republican governor victory in the history of the state, winning by 20 points? It's because people respond to leadership. It's because we've had people that have moved from other states because they support the values that we represent. But even more importantly, we have people in places like Miami who used to be Democrats, used to be independents, who've now switched to become Republicans because of what we've done. In fact, in my election in November, Miami-Dade County is our most populous county, 2.8 million people. And in 2016, Hillary Clinton won that county by 30 percentage points. It was a big-time blue county. I won it by double digits in November. So this can happen, and that's what we need to do. So the question is, how do we move forward nationally as a party? Because the Florida success story, I can point you to a couple other examples in the country where we've had strong Republican leadership. Iowa, for example, under Governor Reynolds, Georgia, Texas. There have been some good ones, don't get me wrong. But our party's lost more than it's won over these last 3 election cycles. And the Democrats are cleaning our clock in Washington and in so many other areas. And so we need to try a different way going forward. We need to try a way that you're going to actually be able to